Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Excellent.
Hmm.
Today, we're heading to 16th century France, the world of François Rabelais.
Rattle.
We'll be exploring some excerpts from Volume 24, Rabelais.txt, from the Great Books of the Western World series.
A classic.
It is. We're going to be getting knee-deep in Gargantua and Pantagruel. I'm curious, have you read these before?
Oh, absolutely. They're wild.
I know. They're known for their over-the-top humor, larger-than-life characters.
What's amazing is how Rabelais blends that humor with sharp satire and even some deep philosophical ideas.
Now that you mention it, he was a bit of a rebel himself. Wasn't he a monk?
He was, and not afraid to challenge the status quo. He had this almost carnivalesque style, absurd and satirical, to poke fun at society.
Especially the church. And its hypocrisy.
You got it.
Okay, before we get too far, let's introduce our main characters.
Right.
Gargantua and Pantagruel.
Father and son, both giants, literally and figuratively, with these massive appetites.
For everything?
Everything. Food, drink, knowledge, adventure. Rabelais really pushes the boundaries with their scale and imagination.
Okay, I need an example. Paint me a picture of this larger-than-life world.
Well, picture Gargantua, casually combing cannonballs from his hair after a battle.
Cannonballs.
Cannonballs. Or maybe he's accidentally eaten 6 pilgrims in a salad.
6 pilgrims in a salad. Wow!
And then he uses a giant tree as a toothpick.
That's a lot to visualize, but those pilgrims in the salad, there's got to be some deeper meaning there.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's Rabelais satirizing blind faith
Yeah.
and the absurdity of certain religious practices. He uses these outlandish situations to critique societal norms.
So he's making us laugh, but also think critically about the world around us.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued by Gargantua's education. I hear it was anything but conventional.
You heard right. It's quite the journey. From experimenting with different materials as a bottom wiper,
You do what?
bottom wiping analysis, to engaging in these complex philosophical debates.
With scholars, bottom wiping analysis.
He even analyzes them for absorbency and rhymes about it.
This is wild.
Oh, and Rabelais even coined a term for bottom wiper.
Torsical.
Gushical. Okay, I have to ask.
Yeah.
What do you think he's trying to say with this? Is it just for laughs? Or is there something more?
It's definitely funny, but I think there's a subtle message about curiosity and the joy of learning. Gargantua is not just wiping. He's experimenting, analyzing, even rhyming. Rabelais is championing this hands-on approach to knowledge.
So even in the most unexpected places, Rabelais is encouraging us to think differently, to question assumptions. I
Exactly.
love that. But we're just scratching the surface here. Rabelais didn't shy away from tackling bigger issues. What were some of his main satirical targets?
Rabelais. Oh, he was fearless. He took aim at everything. The church, war, social hierarchies. Nothing was off limits.
No sacred cows for Rabelais.
Not a one.
Yeah.
And a prime example of this is Friar John.
Ah, Friar John. I've heard about him. What makes him so unique?
He's a warrior monk, loves a good drink, and a brawl. A warrior monk. That's not exactly the image that comes to mind.
Right, and to top it off, he even defends his abbey with the giant sorb apple tree cross.
A sorb apple tree cross.
It's quite the image. He completely shatters the stereotype of the pious pacifist monk.
So, through Friar John, is Rabelais critiquing the church's hypocrisy?
Exactly. He's suggesting that true faith isn't about appearances or blind obedience, but about action.
Action, even if it involves a bit of brawling and boozing.
Well, in Friar John's case, yes, it's Rabelais' way of challenging us to look beyond superficial piety and question those in power who don't practice what they preach.
It seems Rabelais loves to turn expectations upside down, make us question everything we think we know.
Absolutely. And another great example of this is the war between Picrochole and Grangousier,
Gargantua.
Gargantua's father.
Oh, right.
What starts as a petty squabble over some cakes.
Over cakes.
Cakes escalates into this full-blown war, completely pointless, of course.
A war over cakes. That sounds ridiculous.
It is. And that's precisely Rabelais' point. He's using absurdity to highlight the folly of conflict, driven by pride and greed.
So Picrochole, he's like the embodiment of unchecked ambition.
Exactly. He wants to conquer the world, all because of some cakes and a bruised ego.
It makes you wonder, are we really that different today? We still see conflicts arise from these petty disagreements, ego clashes.
It's a timeless commentary on human nature. Rabelais forces us to confront those often absurd motivations behind conflict.
It's a cautionary tale that resonates just as strongly today.
I agree.
Now, amidst all this chaos and satire, Rabelais also presents a vision of a utopian society. the Abbey of Thelem. What can you tell me about this seemingly idyllic place?
Ah, Thelem. It's a fascinating concept. Imagine a community where the only rule is do what thou wilt.
To deal with thou wilt. That sounds a bit dangerous.
Might sound like a recipe for anarchy, but
Right.
Rabelais adds a caveat. The inhabitants are carefully selected.
Ooh.
They're described as free, well-born, well-bred, and conversant in honest companies.
So not just anyone can join this utopia.
Right. Rabelais believed that individuals of good character, given freedom and trust, would naturally incline towards virtuous actions.
A very optimistic view of human nature.
It is.
So it's not about indulging every whim, but fostering an environment where individuals can flourish.
Exactly. The Abbey of Thelem challenges us to rethink societal structures and consider the possibility of a world where freedom and responsibility go hand in hand.
It's an idealistic vision, but one that sparks important questions about human nature and the potential for self-governance.
I think so too.
Now, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Panurge, Pantagruel's loyal companion. He's quite the complex figure, isn't he?
He is. Unlike the larger-than-life Gargantua, Panurge embodies the anxieties and uncertainties of the human experience.
In what way?
Well, he's constantly grappling with questions about marriage, cuckoldry, the meaning of life.
It sounds like he overthinks everything.
He does. He desperately wants answers, but he's skeptical of easy solutions.
So how does he try to find these answers?
He consults oracles, philosophers, even a deaf mute in his search for guidance.
A deaf mute. That's interesting.
But ultimately, his anxieties persist.
It seems Rabelais likes to push boundaries, exploring the limits of communication.
He does. And speaking of communication, we can't talk about Rabelais without talking about his mastery of language.
Oh, absolutely. He's a master of wordplay, puns, neologisms.
He uses language not only to entertain, but to challenge our understanding of the world.
Do you have a favorite example of his linguistic acrobatics?
One that comes to mind is Panurge's encounter with a Limousin scholar.
The Limousin scholar.
He speaks in this garbled mix of Latin and French,
Mm.
creating a hilarious language barrier.
I can imagine. But beyond the humor, is Rabelais making a point about language itself?
Definitely. He's highlighting the complexities of communication
Yes.
and how language can be used to both enlighten and obfuscate.
To enlighten and obfuscate. Interesting.
Yeah, it makes us think about the limitations of words and how meaning can get lost in translation.
That reminds me of another element in Rabelais' work, the frozen words,
The frozen words.
discovered by Pantagruel and his crew. In the frozen sea. What do you make of these words? Frozen in time.
It's such a striking image. I think it speaks to the power and fragility of language.
How so?
These frozen words represent ideas and knowledge, lost or forgotten over time.
A reminder of the importance of preserving knowledge, making sure ideas don't get lost.
Exactly. It also reminds us that language is constantly evolving. The meaning of words can change dramatically over time.
This has been quite the journey. Giants, warrior monks, frozen words. But there's one more group we need to talk about. The gastrolators.
The gastrolators.
I'm curious about this strange group and their obsession with the belly god, Mandus. Who are these people, and what's with their bizarre rituals?
The gastrolators are one of Rabelais' most outrageous creations. They literally worship their stomachs.
Hey, what?
They engage in these elaborate rituals and sacrifices to appease their belly god, Mandus.
So they take indulging in good food to a whole new level.
You could say that.
What's Rabelais trying to convey through their extreme gluttony? Is it just a celebration of good food and drink?
It's definitely more than just a love of food. The gastrolators, with their over-the-top feasts and rituals, they're a satire of excess, misplaced priorities. Rabelais is poking fun at our tendency toward overindulgence, reminding us that the pursuit of pleasure, if left unchecked, well, it can lead to absurdity.
So he's using their extreme behavior to hold up a mirror to our own indulgences. Do you think there are modern-day equivalents of the gastrolators? What would Rabelais find ridiculous about us today?
Oh, that's a great question. I think Rabelais would have a field day with our obsession with social media, our constant need for instant gratification, even our attachment to material possessions. He'd probably see these as modern-day forms of gluttony, consuming our time and energy at the expense of more meaningful pursuits.
You know, you might be right. He probably would have a lot to say about our 21st century excesses. It's fascinating how his work, written centuries ago, can still feel so relevant. So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the key takeaway? What can we learn from this master of satire? of absurdity.
I think the biggest takeaway is that Rabelais, with all the humor, the outlandishness, he's ultimately concerned with the human condition. He's exploring our search for meaning, our struggle with desire, our capacity for both wisdom and foolishness. And he does it in a way that makes us laugh, even as we're confronted with uncomfortable truths about
Right,
ourselves.
doesn't give us any easy answers, does he?
Not at all. But he encourages us to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and embrace the complexities of life with a sense of humor and open-mindedness.
I'm starting to see why Rabelais has endured for centuries. He's not just a funny man. He's a philosopher in disguise, challenging us to think critically about the world and our place in it. What do you think, listener? Does Rabelais' world, with all its giant satire, philosophical musings, does it hold any meaning for you today?
I think it does. We still grapple with many of the same questions. The tension between freedom and responsibility, the pursuit of pleasure and meaning, the role of faith and reason in our lives.
Maybe by revisiting Rabelais' work, we can gain some fresh perspective on these timeless dilemmas. And who knows, maybe we can even learn to laugh at ourselves a little bit along the way.
Laughter is definitely one of Rabelais' greatest gifts. He reminds us that even in the face of life's absurdities, a good dose of humor can be a powerful tool for understanding and coping with the human experience.
Well said. So there you have it, folks. A deep dive into the world of Francois Rabelais, a world where giants roam, satire reigns, and philosophical insights are hidden beneath layers of laughter. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as Rabelais might say, do what thou wilt.